Welcome to Insights Over Espresso, where we explore insights from leaders from the fintech, SaaS, and venture capital space. I'm your host, Joe Marone, and today I'm joined by Hugh Massie, Executive Chairman and founder of DNA Behavior.
Thank you, Joe. It's great
Hugh,
to be
welcome.
with you today.
You've had a fascinating journey from CPA and wealth manager to an executive chairman and founder of DNA Behavior. I'm sure the listeners would love to have you share a bit about that journey and what initially sparked your passion for understanding human behavior in the context of
And probably
finance
the
and
other piece
business.
you wanted to add in there is my accent, because I'm a little way south of Texas. Yeah,
Down
down under.
under.
So what's a reformed accountant doing in the United States in Atlanta probably begs a lot of questions. So for me to explain that, when I was a CPA, or what we call in Australia, chartered accountant, tax specialist, I worked at Arthur Andersen. I think, you and I have some of the same heritage in that regard. When I look back on my career
Yes.
there, I realized that my secret sauce was innately personalizing the experience for clients. And I think that, in some ways, providing tax advice is a commodity in some ways. Yes, you need to be smart and figure out solutions and things like that for clients, but lots of people can do that. But I think that how the work gets presented to clients and communicated was really important. And, what I learned to
Yep.
do was, somebody might ask me the question requiring the tax advice, and they might be very high level and they just want a response in 2 pages. But the work was a little more complicated than that. And we had to do a lot of research, and that involved 50 pages of content, and the bill's going to be $100,000. You're not going to get paid $100,000 for 2 pages, but you would for 50. So you have to learn how to present the work to meet the needs of every person and get paid. And I think that's sort of one of my examples of personalization. And then when I left the accountancy world, I set up a wealth management family office type business, always with the goal to provide a personalized experience that private banks couldn't do, and other wealth managers. And I think just intuitively, my experience from the tax uh, consulting world carried over to how wealth management services were delivered. So I somehow figured out how to treat different family members differently. But I was doing all of this intuitively. And then one day, a friend asked me, "What are you really passionate about?" "Well, I want to help people all over the world become financially self-empowered." And I did 6 months reflection on that, because that was such a deep comment. And I thought, gee, that's quite powerful, and I need to think about that. And I went and did a lot of reflection. And what I found was that I'd been writing in my day journal for about 3 years about human behavior. And people had these financial personality traits, and that could be measured. And I thought, so financial empowerment means it's about teaching people about themselves and their financial personality. And if I knew that as well, I'd be able to personalize the experience. So bingo, I had worked out what I needed to do. And then I had the chance meeting with a psychologist, and she confirmed my underlying theory that people have this natural hardwired behavior. When under pressure, that's what they revert to. And I just said to her, "Carol, I need to be able to measure that." And so she took me on a journey to get psychometric measurement done. And that's when I came to America to meet with people in Atlanta at universities and with consultants to help build a system that would be scientifically validated, that I could distribute and use not only in my own wealth management business, but anywhere around the world. And that's the path. And I think that on top of that, I'd always been fascinated with money. And one might look at that and say, that's just an interest in having more of it, which I suppose we all do. But it was really I was always more interested in what people did with it, why they did what they did with it, what it did to relationships, how family dynamics worked, and money was often a driver within why business leaders made the decisions they did in their businesses, or investing in culture or not investing in it. I was always intrigued, and knew money was a big dimension. And to me, it sort of put me on the path of, well, it needs to be measured, and how people deal with money can be measured. And that's really what got me on the behavioral journey. And I think, Joe, as I've done it, this whole field of behavioral economics has unpacked itself. Daniel Kahn, a year after I came up with all my theories, which we just started implementing, unbeknown to me, Daniel Kahneman wins a Nobel Prize for prospect theory. So people are talking about loss aversion and a whole lot of other decision-making biases. 10 years after that, he starts talking about the fact people have a natural hardwired behavior and what he calls a system one type decision-making approach. I'd call it a level one decision-making style, natural behavior. And, I think that the penny has dropped with more people about what behavioral economics is. And somehow I'm in there making it practical through measurement. So that's the journey. It's probably a longer answer, maybe wanted.
No, it's fine. That was an interesting story. I'm sure the listeners will really enjoy that. So when you look at DNA behavior, it was founded in 2001. It has really evolved into an all-in-one
Yeah.
behavioral science tech platform. What was the core problem that you set out to solve then? And how has that mission evolved with the advancements in technology and
So
behavioral
I think that
science?
it has evolved a lot. I think that the core problem that I saw up front was if you were a wealth manager, for example, but it could be any service provider. We also, accountant, lawyer, anyone providing services. How can you better know and engage your client? And while psychometric tools have been used a lot in HR, could they be used more in HR and team building and leader development? Absolutely. But the area where they hadn't been used was with client decision making, particularly around money, and that's highly emotionally charged situation. And really what most people can't see with the naked eye, if you want to call it that, what's very invisible, is the hardwired behaviors and how people have this behavioral flip when they're under pressure. So you can see a person one way in a friendly client meeting or at a cocktail party, but under pressure, usually caused by money situations, they behave differently. And you would see that in offices and things like situations as well, where people might go postal on something or get angry. That's what will go on with clients. And that's what I wanted to know. So I could build tailor-made solutions and handle a person based on who they really were at the core. I think that was always the genesis of DNA, and it still is today. But I think that if I narrowed it down and said today, what's the quick win for people? And maybe that's where we can head to is when you meet a new person, how can you get connection with them much quicker? Not spend 10 years and 5 years
Mm,
going around the hoops and figuring it all out. How can you know right up front? And I've got people saying to me, Hugh, I'm going to meet with a major investor tomorrow. Can you help me communicate better with that person? So what I do now, and that's what we do in the digital scan with our digital scan product is, which we didn't have 20 years ago, we only had this in the last year, is let's profile them. We can run a profile through our system and I give you a meeting script that solves that initial immediate engagement point. And now, 20 years ago or in 2001 and up to 2 years ago, we would have had to have the client complete a profile for an advisor or a salesperson or whoever it is to know that as well to engage in, which is, Joe, a natural friction. A lot of
right.
people would do it, but that's reflected in the fact that we've got several million users in our platform in 125 countries, but it's a friction. I think the big evolution is we can do this digitally now where AI can complete the profile, get you a pretty accurate result, and now you can get that instant connection, which is sort of the immediate problem that we always wanted to solve for. If I could have done that when I was a tax advisor, going back to the original story, it would have been great. That would have been like magic. As opposed to I was intuitively doing it, as opposed to this is more science based.
Okay. Interesting. So your public narrative is stated as behavior makes money. Incredibly compelling. When you zoom out on that and look at the broader landscape of behavioral intelligence, what major shifts or trends do you think are shaping its future, especially in personalizing experiences, because you spoke about that a lot, and improving decision making in the leadership and
So I
finance
think I
area?
think if I'm looking out to the future, I think AI is the game changer, and that AI technologies, and they're just going to continue to evolve and develop in the coming weeks, days, years. But AI is basically run on data, and that's the key thing that feeds all of the AI models. And where I see the opportunity is to use our technology to provide organizations with behavioral data. I was talking with a major financial institution. I was doing a podcast with them and I was in your seat and I was the host and I was talking to them about how they've developed as a behaviorally informed organization. It's a large European insurance company. And really the future for them is also behavioral data because they can, while they've got the practices embedded in their business of behavioral type practices, experiments, how you innovate, how you design products. But if you know who every customer is, because a lot of this happens on the customer end of things, you can tailor the experience. And I
Yep.
think that today, a lot of organizations, there are a number of organizations out there in different industries that probably can tailor the experience to an 80% level for 20% of their clients or customers. In the future, we can do that for 98% of customers who could get a 98% tailoring. And that's really when we get to very pinpointed
Wow.
communication, precision matching in offers, the right person showing up at the right time, the right thing being said at the right time. You can get very deep, and technology allows us to do that. We're going to get there, but the organizations have to have the right data about the person to do that. And the piece they miss today really is it's measured in psychometrics, but it's the emotional decision, the emotional part. Organizations would know the demographics of a person and how much money they've got, but two people with the same
Yep.
demographic and the same amount of money living in the same suburb should not be treated as the same person in simple terms. But that is what happens today.
So DNA behavior explicitly embraces AI-driven behavioral technologies. So with that said, how do you see AI further enhancing your proprietary psychometric system and the first-party database to really uncover, deeper behavioral and money-related traits, potentially moving from the millions of profiles that you spoke about to
Yeah, I think that's a great question. And that's something that I'm going to be actively working on and pursuing. So already we have 275 million or so people in the database from digital scans. And we've got some projects lined up where we will add more numbers to that during this year. But I think the way I look at it is that for all the people that are digitally scanned, quite a number of them are going to complete the actual profile. And that's going to give us more, if you want to call it first party data. So our number of actual profile completions should ratchet up significantly. But also because AI is able to mine public data sources pretty well now, there's a lot out there about people. There's a lot, or in the other way around, there's a lot that's not. Most things are public in reality. So therefore, we can even get more pinpointed in our psychometric measurement with machine learning to get even more accurate results. And what we have now is very accurate right now, but we can go to new levels with this. And AI provides that opportunity because it enables us to access data that we would not have otherwise got. And that's not doing anything unethical or illegal. It would just be able to work with what people even provide us in just organizations in general interactions can be put into the behavioral mix. And when you align that then with their pure psychometric data, this is what's going to enable the continuous evolution of the precision marketing, if you want to call it that comes. And so it's just a matter of
Interesting.
organizations. The big thing I think, Joe, is that for organizations in the future, they're going to have to get a really good handle on their data that they've got now, because in a lot of big organizations, it's spread all over the place. And you got to get
Yes.
it into more of what I call an enterprise data center, centralized. More can be done. And then you've got to have the approach, resources, expertise, technology to gather more data, then to process it with machine learning. But I think then this will really bring forward behavioral science to be a key part of organizations. I think as much as a CTO is in the C-suite, so should a behavioral science leader. And I think that is sort of there in some cases with CIOs, but having a much stronger behavioral element to it, discipline to it.
Okay. So behavioral finance, referred to as BeSci, is becoming a standard differentiator in wealth tech. So how does DNA behavior differentiate its deep longitudinal quality of behavioral data from newer AI native competitors who might focus on more frictionless data collection?
Yeah, so I suppose we're going to be more and more in there as well with frictionless data with our model. But I think that our ability to measure the biases of people is pretty well known, and there's a strong track record. So what we measure psychometrically is pretty deep with 4,000 insights in our system. So I think that's going to help us. I think it's also the technological strength we have in our systems is a capability, but I still think also measuring the natural hardwired behavior is a key differentiator. And that's also going to help us. All of those things are going to help us unlock the personalization. I think a lot of people talk about behavioral finance today, but it's still a one size fits all approach. If we're talking about who is the human being or, dealing with human beings and decision making, it's still a lot of it's one size fits all, that all humans make decisions the same way, but they don't. Yes, I think we're all sold on the fact that humans are irrational and they will tend to do ABCD things or value ABCD things, but that is true, but in different doses for every person. And I think getting better measurement of that is what is important. And I think that's where our strength is going to be in that field.
Right. So you referred earlier that AI has really allowed your product to complete behavioral assessments. And could you elaborate? And now you alluded to that it's rather frictionless. Could you elaborate on how that frictionless data capture is changing the game for mass scale behavioral intelligence? And what are the implications for industries beyond wealth
Yeah,
management?
so I think for the listeners, if you can imagine that, let's say that an organization said to us, to DNA, under contract and all the usual provisos that we're going to behave ourselves, which we've always done with privacy and whatnot. But organizations already today are analyzing people with the information they've already collected, demographic type information, financial transaction information. With our digital scan product, if we know where the person works currently or used to work, we can go out into public data sources and do a tracking of them. And we can get enough information coming back, even if it's a housewife type person who hasn't worked for 10 years or more, like my wife, you can still get enough information out there from public data sources that allow our questionnaire that's been psychometrically tested till the cows come home to be, and then that's what produces the initial results. So then if you imagine no human beings had to be involved in that, so long as the data is set up that we know where the person works. And that is not always the case. I was working with a major bank recently, or we started working with a major bank, and initially, they knew how much money everybody had and what the bank accounts were, but they didn't know where they worked. Now, that was sitting in a different database in the bank. And so eventually they spend 6 months figuring all that out. But once that's all there, we can just run the digital scan and, 1 million accounts or 5 million or 10 million accounts can be processed. And we did it with some very large databases last year. And it's pretty much going to say it's almost automatic, and that the digital scans can get processed. And that's why you see on our website, there's 275 million people in the database. So that then makes this extremely quick. And then, I think for us, that does allow the opportunity for mass scale personalization. And to your point, or the question before, the more we can do machine learning, marry that data with other elements, and then as people engage in transactions, you learn more, we can get deep pretty quickly. And I think that's what will transform human behavior, but will also transform businesses, because the businesses that do this will get better engagement adoption. I think digital adoption of solutions, online delivery of solutions, sale of solutions. We all go onto platforms and we drop off fairly quickly. I think that if the experience was better, the choice architecture is better, which all comes down to personalizing, more people are going to stay on. And that's where there's going to be a big boost for organizations.
Yeah. I'm going back to your comment that you made just a moment ago on that bank and having the account balances, but not knowing where the people worked, but then literally they had it in another system in a data silo somewhere else in the bank. And once they were able to retrieve that, they could
Yep.
run all these assessments that you spoke of. I would imagine that would really provide some amazing insights to the wealth managers to then
Right. So
approach
if you imagine
those
it, if you're
clients.
that bank and then you've got several million names for the private bank, and we've run the digital scans, everybody's been now given a behavioral style, what you do with it, how do you communicate with this person this way? Well, okay, that way their likely decision-making patterns are this. You know a few other things about it. The marketing department can do a lot with that just technologically to provide a better messaging experience, content. But then the person that
Yep.
interacts with those customers, it starts with a relationship manager. Okay, how does he or she turn up in front of you or me and talk to us in a better way? And also then recognize maybe our spouse sitting beside us who's got to engage in this, and they're going to be probably opposite in style. And how do you engage both from the start? Now the cues are there to do that. But wealth manager or private banker, relationship manager has not had to go and get profiles done up front or assessments done up front to get there on that. That's just in their Salesforce account or HubSpot account or whatever technology they use, and or it's just on
Yeah.
their. Hey, I'm meeting you today. Let's just cut to the chase, bullet points, give him some options, talk about risk reward. But you know, Hugh's wife Jennifer is there, and we need to explain it differently and make her feel comfortable that the kids are going to be looked after, right? And family security is provided. All important goals, but everybody's
Uh-huh.
got to be looked after in that conversation.
Yeah. Good segue into another question that runs on the coattails of what you just said. DNA behavior has a wide variety or array of use cases from,
Yeah,
advisor
yeah.
client matching, and you spoke about that, leadership due diligence. So which of these areas do you see as having the most significant
I
growth
think that
potential?
if I said to our business, it would be personalization, which is the advisor client scenario, helping organizations deal with their data. That would be that's potentially the biggest for our business because in a sense with the same data and methodology, we can do it many times. I think there's no doubt that's bigger, but in terms of impact on the world, maybe changing how leaders lead their companies would be more important and have value. And so our ability to now use this same digital scan solution to go and
Mm-hmm.
measure how a particular leadership team of a major company, for example, is making financial decisions because their financial behavior will drive how they make the financial decisions, which in a sense is a big driver of the company. You think that the behavior and the money of the company are interlinked. We can have tremendous impact, not only to help investors make better decisions if they have better insight, but also I think if those leaders are open-minded, for them to see where there might be blind spots, what they could do to strengthen their company, and in the end make better decisions. That probably also, if they're embracing that from a leader development point of view, they're probably likely to be embracing the behavioralizing of their data anyway. They get the point that a behavioral economics approach to running the business is powerful, and there is proven results for this. And the metrics that we've produced in the Behavior Makes Money, Joe, show that the companies that have the right behavioral constructs in their senior leadership teams do better financially in terms of bottom line profits than their competitors. And then you overlay the fact that there is more proven research out there that if you adopt behavioral economics techniques inside your business, you can get massive returns out of that. The organization I spoke with this morning is getting 6 returns for every dollar invested by deploying behavioral economics techniques in their business. Why wouldn't you, if you're a leader, do that? I mean, it's
Yeah. Especially with
sure, and
those returns.
and some of it is just making some minor tweaks to how things are done. I think there's some bigger impact things that could be done, but than they do now. And but it's like everything. You've got to start small and go bigger and bigger with it. But we're not talking
Sure.
massive tech deployments to get these results. But also on the
Right.
other side, you're not just telling the salespeople go and make more phone calls and let's hope for more sales either, which doesn't work. Which is sort of the old way. Just go and do more of that activity and let's hope that that increases performance. It doesn't. I think what we're talking about is changing the environment of how businesses operate and how the people operate inside it, combined with some technology, being AI and other tech tools. And I think you'll find some amazing results can be
Yeah.
achieved.
Yep. When I was with Arthur Anderson on the consulting side, we used to call that
Yeah.
change the playing field. So, a common challenge for enterprises is translating these powerful psychometric results into actionable prompts for frontline teams. So, help us understand how DNA behavior is addressing this, and where do you see AI playing a role in further simplifying the deployment of this behavioral data
Well,
into
I
our
think that
daily
if I
workflows?
said that one of the frictions with human behavior to date until a year or 2 years ago was you had to get people profiled. Well, that's sort of a huge barrier. But two, even if people got profiled, then for the human being to have to understand it and work with it and sort of go and look something up. Whereas now it can, with AI, it can be made to work for them. And I think that's the key thing. It sort of almost goes on all around you, and you're being made as the salesperson, the advisor, or the marketing person. You're just automatically now more effective because you've got the correct inputs to provide the right solution for the right person. And I think that's how this works. And then I think the other part would be is in building, say, choice architecture for selling products online and delivering and workflows online, knowing who's on the end of it, the person that's been taken through that online journey, who they are, you can move all the frictions out of the way for them very easily. But it's not a human having to guess about that anymore because we can know.
Mm. Okay. So your thought leadership, especially the Behavioral Economics Institute, generates significant interest. How are you currently systematizing this into outbound campaigns and nurture sequences and product qualified
Yeah,
leads?
so for us at DNA Behavior, it's digitally scanning every person that we come into contact with, and then it's customizing, the marketing around that. So, we use our CRM systems help us with those deployments. So I think what we're getting to is that AI is and with the behavioral insight is allowing us to customize campaigns at a far greater level than ever before. And you can change the
Mm,
messaging for one person versus another, to emphasize what they need to hear. It doesn't need to be a one size fits all campaign. Let's minimize risk for everybody. Well, not everybody wants to minimize risk. Well, that's not important for every person. Other things are important for people.
yeah. So walk the audience through, what's involved in getting scammed as you refer to it, because you mentioned, hey, we can scan and assess everybody that we come in contact with. What's
Essentially,
involved?
going back to the database type points that we were making before, I think so long as we know where the person works now or used to work, so we've got the correct
Mhm.
identifier on them as to who they are as a person. Now, I haven't looked up how many Joe Marones are out there, but yeah, there's a lot. So I
There's a
need to
lot.
know the correct Joe Marone. Hugh Massie is a little easier, but once I know the correct Joe Marone in Texas, and I've got that identifier, then I can go and track your career history, and it would go all the way back through, your career at Arthur Andersen and PW, Price Waterhouse, and the varying other roles,
Yeah.
and then we can get a sense of who you are from that, and then there will be, because I know who you are, there will be blogs, podcasts, other public communications that you've made that all get thrown into the pot. And then we have a if you want to call it a prioritization of what information is more important than other data points, and that's used then to feed the system.
That's interesting, and I'll make it easy for you. It's Joseph V. Marone Jr. But it's interesting because you talk about this psychometric output, but there's been no questions. So all it is looking at where has one
So
worked
the questions
and
are in
assign.
NA behavior discovery. When that's completed by a person, we've got
Okay.
46 questions in there, and it can be done with 11 questions or 17 questions with less accurate results, but still pretty accurate. But let's say we do there's 46 questions is the primary, the mainline assessment that's been scientifically validated. There is, for example,
Okay.
question one would ask you to choose between three words: aspiring, patient, or detailed. And then the next one's going to get you to choose between caring, imaginative, and competitive, right? Now, they're all measured, probably would say I'm all of those, right? But you're more of, let's take the comparing and competitive, right? You're more of one than of the other. I'd like to think I am caring, right? But I happen to be more competitive. And then
Yeah.
out of the three, the caring would unfortunately end up on the bottom. It doesn't mean I'm not caring, but it's not my go-to position to demonstrate it. And so we have 46
Right.
questions like that are very carefully constructed. This is where the science is. And that's what took the
Okay.
validation study, essentially, that powers the digital scan product. It was done over 3.25 million profiles. So what we know is then that from public data, we've got a good prediction on what Joe would choose in the 3 words. And that's what
Int-
powers the system,
Interesting.
the digital scanning. And that's where the
Yeah.
opportunities for machine learning, more data access will only improve the results over time of the digital scanning process. It may never be the same as you having completed your own. I always think that is the best. But sales and marketing, positioning products, lining somebody up, it's pretty good for where we are in the world
Interesting.
today. And I think then, as you were asking before, is from a financial dynamics perspective, let's say someone is digitally scanned through a financial advisor or some setting like that, the likelihood that they would complete the actual assessment goes up. Or I go and scan a leadership team and they see that there, and that's an initial discussion point, they're more likely to want to go through the full process to know the real truth and what decisions do they then make. And I think my sort of distinguishing point is, if the decisions are very high stakes decisions, I would say complete the full assessment right now today. But when it's sales and marketing, engagement, how does a board or team work together, generally speaking, the digital scan's pretty good.
Interesting. So for leadership due diligence and, investor analytics, which can be labor intensive, how do you envision productizing these powerful insights into more repeatable, semi-automated offerings for investors?
So a website, and you can go to, there's an ancillary website that runs off the main dnabehavior.com website, but just to cut it short, you can go to pegasusratings.com. And just like today, Morningstar goes and does very detailed reports on companies based on the financials, which is lagging data, and provides a 1 to 5 star rating on the company. And that stays there until the next lot of financial information comes out or something changes that would affect that rating. We designed the Pegasus rating system so that we can measure a leadership team. So if let's say that you want to look at Tesla and have a look at their leadership team and their board, that's all publicly available information as to who those individuals are. We can then provide a rating, right, using our system. And we actually did that about 18 months ago, and we updated it where we look at the S&P 500. And we can compare all the companies in there, the leadership teams versus profits, that leads to a Pegasus ratings. And we're in the process of building that out to do that on every private company that's in the market for capital. Now, that's just putting an initial stake in the ground as to the strength of that leadership team. But it's pretty powerful. I mean, I could tell you I'm careful of the name, but it was a public company a year ago that had a big fall from grace, and the process picked it up. Had a very strong female leader and a bunch of patsies sitting around her. And so the company could grow in a way on her inspiration. And this is not the healthcare Theranos, but it's a bit like that, right? There's no fraud involved. It's just that you got a single strong inspirational leader, but a bunch of weak people around her. I'm not saying they're bad humans, but they're not filling all the gaps or the talents that are needed for sustained long-term growth and innovation and managing costs, right? So you see that, and these companies some of them will grow with 1 or 2 people at the helm, and they somehow become a darling of the market. They get talked up, but it's a house of cards, right? Now, if you know that, you could short that stock. Just like Bill Gates tried shorting Tesla. But that's one example of it. But if you're a PE firm and you're looking at companies in a particular segment and you're doing roll-ups and all that type of stuff, why wouldn't you want to know at once in the one sort of sitting something about every leadership team and which one's got a strong leadership team, which one's slightly weaker? They've got a good platform, but they're not the team to go forward. We've got to do something. It gives you some insights to start having at least a better conversation, or you might even rule out a team and just say, I'm not going to do any more with that. Or you know what conversation you're going to have up front, how you're going to talk about valuation until proven otherwise. And I think that's the power of doing this.
That's fascinating. I mean, that's very insightful. So, as a visionary founder who spoke about caring about scale, investor grade analytics, and monetizing behavioral IP, what are some of the key areas where you believe AI automation could most significantly impact DNA behavior's ability to achieve your lofty goals?
I think for us to achieve our goals, it's going to require organizations on the client side that their data is in good shape. I think that's going to be a key step. I think for us over time, I'm going to just have to continuously build out our team, to be honest, with the right people that can do more and more work at integrating our system to other systems. So that's in part technology, it's part people with behavioral science backgrounds, but I've already been having those interactions with people where they've got a strong behavioral background, they've got an innovation capability, and they understand tech and products. That's probably the key area for us. I think the technology is there to do it. I think we'll get some surprises in some cases how easy it is to deploy it. And I think there'll be other cases where it's a bit more narrowing in alignment because there's business model changes as well. I think it's not just a technology plug-in. There's always product redesigns, business model
Yep.
redesigns.
Yeah, you're looking for, as far as a skill set, you're looking for a person that has a technology alliances background and a lot of partnership
Yeah, and I
experience
think
working in
those things,
technology.
ground probably like your and there are others out there. That's important, and I think it's then finding the opportunities. But this is also a new endeavor. But I think that the reason that behavioral science hasn't taken off in organizations is still because a little bit it hasn't been understood by leaders, but two, it's perceived to have friction. And I think really the goal, I suppose the concluding message is it doesn't have to have the friction you think. It can be done quite simply, actually.
Yeah. Okay. So, given your cross vertical offerings, defining the ICP and tailoring messaging can be complex, right? Have you considered AI driven ICP and, account scoring models to refine your targeting and address lead generation and pipeline
I
scalability
think we
challenges?
need to be doing, Joe, more of that. And that's absolutely critical that we drill down in on the right targets and what I suppose Hugh perceives is the right target may not always be the right target. And to have better metrics type system like you're talking about to define the targets, yeah, it would be very helpful. I think that's an invaluable service that can be.
Yeah. Cool. For founders and product leaders who are listening, what advice would you give them about leveraging AI for growth, particularly when it comes to understanding and monetizing behavioral
Well,
intelligence?
I think the first thing is that integrating behavior doesn't have to be the fifth thing on the list anymore. It can be done uh, today. And that I think what we've always got to remember is that people are, even though we've got a lot of tech, people are at the epicenter of everything. And while you can run your business, I think with far less employees and be massively scalable if you think it through, you still got to have a lot of customers. And so they're humans and they need to be dealt with as humans. I think that's important. I think for founders, one of the things that we've done in a lot of research on this, on the success traits of founders, the number one cause of failure is not being adaptable enough. And so therefore we as founders, and I'll put myself in that bucket, can be very wedded to a particular solution and what we think is right and shut out the noise from everybody else that's trying to, in a way, provide you inputs, and you don't make enough tweaks and pivots that you should, and you miss the market. And someone was telling me the other day, Airbnb, Brian Chesky there made 17 pivots, major pivots, before Airbnb became well known, right? And I think and goodness knows, actually, we sort of generally know what that product is. There's probably been more pivots since, and organizations with AI have got to pivot in major ways. And so I think that being adaptable around product market fit, putting your ego out the door a lot more, that's where, like a scoring solution that's more objective, it might tell you that, okay, you've been hunting down this line, but you actually should be over here, is very, very important.
Interesting. Well, thank you for sharing such incredible insights. Where can our listeners learn more about both DNA behavior and
Yeah,
your work,
so
or get in
one, you
touch
can
with
go
you?
to dnabehavior.com and you'll see everything there, and there's plenty about me there, and there's ways to contact me there. You can also go to hughmassie.com, and that's a more direct way to find me, and then there's LinkedIn. It's a pleasure,
Excellent.
Joe. It's
Well,
been a
thank
great
you again.
conversation.